Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Diane Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is March 13th, 2024, and have I got a great show for you. Now, we actually did a lot of the introduction this time in the interview, which is unusual for me. I usually want to just jump right into the questions and start chatting. But this time I did it a little bit differently, so we're going to go straight to the episode. So sit back and enjoy. I am so excited about this interview, and I know I say that a lot, but this one is definitely special for me because we are going to be celebrating love all the way through February and March for the opener of season 3 of Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, the Book Talk podcast. And this author fits so well into this category for so many reasons. You know, I had been finding all of these authors who are romance authors and spicy authors and all of these fiction genres, but I really wanted to have somebody who had experience with having a love for life and adventure and brought a book to the public that really shares that whole idea, because love is so important, but especially self-love, because it can be so important to your individual happiness. And I think this author is a perfect person to talk to about that. Can you please tell everybody who you are and the book that you have brought to us?
Well, thank you so much for that fantastic introduction, Diane. And I'm so excited to be here talking with you as well. A little bit about me. I am many things, so I'm going to try to condense this down and just give you the highlights. I'm a yoga teacher. I have a little studio in Papua New Guinea where I live. For those of you who, like me, are not great with geography, that is located just above Australia. I am an author. My first book was just published a little over 2 months ago, Some Kind of Magic, a true story of love, life, and wanderlust. And apart from that, I usually say I dabble in graphic design so as not to offend any actual experienced graphic designers out there who are seasoned professionals, but it's something I do love and have been spending a lot of time with over the past few years. And beyond all that professional stuff, overall, I'm just someone who is really loving this adventure of life that we get to live and trying to make the most of it.
You know, we set this interview up so quickly. I haven't had a time to finish reading your book, but I have read about the first third of it. And I have to say, it is so well written and it has such great humor to it. And there are so many things in it that just make me want to keep reading. Whenever you came into this interview, I was still sitting here reading the book because I could not stop. And honestly,
I love hearing that.
That's probably what I'll be doing as soon as we end this. I'll save the podcast and then go back to reading because I want to know what happens next.
Oh, that's so good. I love hearing this kind of stuff. I love books that I can't put down. So I'm delighted if I can give that experience to others as well.
Well, I think we need to talk about the story that is in this book, because the transformation that you made in your life was so dramatic. And there's probably a lot of people who would not even be able to comprehend how you could walk away from the life that you had for the life that you have.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have understood it either about 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. Prior to the change that you're mentioning, I was working as a corporate executive in the fast-moving consumer goods category, working for hair care and then a dermocosmetic company. And I was responsible for international sales. So I traveled a lot for work, and that was actually my teenage dream come true. You know, when you're in high school and they're like, everyone's like, what are you going to study in college? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to get paid to travel. Like, is that a thing? And it turns out it is. I studied international business and ended up having that dream fulfilled. And so I'm so grateful for that period of my life, which lasted about 14 years. And I really met a lot of wonderful people. I love business. I got to travel to a lot of incredible places. But after 14 years of it, I was just tired. It wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And there was a moment that really was just kind of a perfect storm of a lot of frustration and things going wrong and things just pissing me off that led to me yelling out loud at my computer alone in a hotel room in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I just yelled, I don't want to do this anymore. And it wasn't until I heard myself yell that I realized, wow, I don't want to do this anymore. I realized, if I don't want to do this, no one is making me do this. I have the option to do something else. But then I had to ask myself, what do I want to do instead? And I really didn't know because that career had been my life for so long and it took like all of my energy went to that. So I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do instead, except that I knew I wanted to keep traveling, but I wanted to travel slowly. I wanted to have time to spend enough time in a place to really understand the culture and like go beneath the surface and learn a little more about that country. And the other thing I knew was that I wanted to go back to Bali because I had been to Bali once and it was the most beautiful place on earth, beautiful and magical that I had been to. So I kind of started with those two things and then everything kind of came together from there. And for the record, I didn't just quit my job the next day. I had a lot of responsibilities, both at work and with my house that needed to be wrapped up. So it was about a 4-month process. But yeah, 4 months after making that decision, I did. And leaving not only my job, but also the country and headed off to India and then Southeast Asia and spent a few years over there.
I think that would be the hardest part for me. I've made those big decisions that I'm going to go do something completely different, move to the other side of the world. I've made those, but I am not good at waiting. I have no patience. And I think the hardest part would be once you've made that decision, having to wait for 4 months to make that change.
Well, I'm a very impatient person as well. This is my ongoing character flaw that I work with, but it wasn't waiting. There was just a lot of action. Like there were a lot of work projects that I needed to wrap up and get to a point where they could be handed over to someone else. I was finishing up renovations at my house. So it wasn't just sitting and waiting. I figured, I might need a fallback to earn money at some point here. So let me get my TEFL, my English teaching certification. So I was doing that as well. So yeah, there was no time to really get impatient.
Now, one of the things that makes you perfect for our love fest that we're going through for the first 2 months of our season 3, love is a big theme in your book.
It is. Yeah. It is. It's definitely one of the top 2 main themes. And I really realized in the journey that love just pervades our whole world, in so many different forms. And it was a really beautiful experience to get to discover all these forms of love and just to find love in so many ways in different corners of the world. And also, can I just say, I love this love fest thing. I'm so happy to be part of a love fest. So cool.
Well, people always just think whenever you say love, it's romantic love, it's Valentine's Day, and then it just kind of falls away after that. And it's like, no, there is so much more to love. You have love of your friends. You can have love of life. You can have love of cooking. And we really need to focus more on the things that we love and the people we love every single day. And it has so much to do with our own personal happiness. When you realize you have so much love around you and things that you love, it just lightens your whole life.
It really does. And I think it's really an energy, right? And so it shows up in different ways, like especially when it's just between you and your romantic partner, it shows up in a certain way. When it's between you and your friends, it shows up in a certain way. And it's when it's just with you and loving life, like you said, like loving cooking, like that, just that pleasure, that enjoyment. It's just such a good feeling. Yeah, it does just light up your whole life.
And that's one reason why we're trying to bring in so many different authors like you, that your book is not a fiction novel. It's about finding your own love of life and connecting with others around you and finding that inner peace.
Yeah, although there is a little bit of romance in it. You haven't gotten
Yeah.
to it yet, but
There
you'll
was
find
the
it.
first one, the first one.
Oh, yes, yeah. There are actually many throughout.
And I thought it was really interesting when you're talking about that you met Alex on a very auspicious day that you met on Halloween. I had to laugh because I met my husband for the first time on Friday the 13th.
Oh, that's too funny. Another highly auspicious date.
Yeah, it was so funny. We did not plan that. We were like, hey, let's go out this Friday. And then I looked at the calendar and I'm like, oh, like, but it turned out to be a lucky day for me. So
I love it.
now, one of the things that you were talking about is you have had an experience with repeating numbers in your life. I really want to get into this.
Ooh, I love this topic. Yes. So those first came into my awareness probably about 10 years ago. I was visiting a friend in Cleveland, Ohio, and there were kind of a small group of us there. And she at one point looked at her watch and she's like, oh my gosh, it's 4:44. I keep seeing these repeating numbers. And I was like, oh. And after she said that, I would notice when I saw them, and I just kind of interpreted it as, oh, it means something good is going to happen. Like that's just the meaning I chose to make out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while, like that was in my life. It wasn't a huge important thing, but it was 6 years ago now that in one of the early chapters of the book, I explained how this happened. I had gone for a job interview. And at the time, I had a job already. I wasn't really looking for another one, but I also wasn't that happy at my job. So this other opportunity had come up. And to make a long story short, it basically boiled down to a choice between like what seemed like financially the right decision and what was the decision that actually my heart really wanted and kind of what my soul wanted. So it so happened that at 3 key stages of the interview process, I happened to glance at a clock. Like one time it was getting in the car, I turned the car on and it was 1:11. That was after the first interview. And then there was another occasion where I think the recruiter had called and I hung up with him and it was 2:22. And then I was on the phone discussing like the final details with my future boss and hung up with him. And I was in an airport and walking through and I glanced and I see this huge clock on the wall with digital numbers and it's 3:33. And I was like, oh, wow, that was interesting because that was like a lot, like this sequence of 222.
Yeah.
At these key stages. And I'm like, And so I did end up making the choice that my heart wanted, not the seemingly financially safe one. And ever since, I've just been seeing those numbers more and more often at really key moments in my life. And it's something that I absolutely love because it's, for me, I take them now as like winks from the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it, for me, is just a reminder that there's some mysterious higher power out there that is a benevolent force and that is interested in our well-being. And I don't know how this magic happens, like how is this benevolent force managing to pay personal attention to me? But it happens so much throughout the years of the journey that's recounted in the book. So those numbers do come up a lot in the book. And actually, a friend of mine who read, she was the very first one to read the first draft. And she told me, oh, maybe you should call this book 1111.
I found that really fascinating when I was reading that in the book about how the numbers keep repeating, because I never see like 444, anything like that. But I'm always looking at the clock when it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, that's a cool number.
It's like, and I don't know why, but it seems like that happens so often that I'm always looking at a clock somewhere when it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think that's funny every time I see that.
That is so cool. Yeah, I know people have different numbers too. Like one of my friends sees 717, another one sees 44. Like I think it's really cool. We have our own unique numbers.
Now, this isn't the only thing that you have gotten some guidance from that you were on the right path. You also had your tarot cards read by somebody and then a chart done as well.
Yes. And those two things, they were interesting because I'm not the kind of person who seeks out readings
Hmm.
very often. It'll be just kind of once in a blue moon. But the tarot card readings, for some reason, I was drawn to get that done. And it was because of who the woman is. Her name is Kim Kennedy. And I actually just saw her again last week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she lives in Fort Lauderdale. But yeah, I decided to do a tarot card reading with her because I just really loved her energy. And one of the things that she told me that stuck with me, it's been like 7 years, is that she told me, and she was talking about like the journey, like the near future. And she
Hmm.
said, you're not going to be able to see where you're going, but you will be guided. It's going to feel like you are blindfolded, but that you're being guided by spirits. And I never forgot that because that is exactly what the whole journey felt like. There were just so many moments where I had no idea what I was going to be doing, the next week or the next month. And then something would happen. Like I would meet the right person who would kind of direct me to where I needed to go. And it just all worked out amazingly.
And it seems like whenever you were getting ready to go to India, that was definitely true, that all of these things just fell into place for you.
Yeah, they absolutely did just like fall incredibly well into place, which was kind of shocking to me because I had been this huge planner of a person, like who needed to plan everything out all the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And I discovered that, wow, when we stop planning so much, things actually work out better than if we planned them ourselves, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, in that case of India, because I had thought I was going to go to Bali first, and then before I had bought the ticket or anything, when I was still in that 4 month planning stage, another friend of mine called me, who's one of my yoga friends, because I had already been practicing yoga for over 10 years. So she called and she's like, "Hey, do you want to do a yoga teacher training with me in Key West?" And I said, "Oh, that's a yoga teacher training is a good idea. But why would we do it in Key West? Why don't we do it in India where yoga started? And it's much cheaper over there." She's like, "Well, I can't just go to India for a month. I have work." At that point, I had left my job already and I was just finishing up house projects. So I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not held back by anything. So I think I'll go to India. So it's because of that phone call. I decided to go to India first. And then I ended up spending 4 months there.
Because you
Yeah.
even thought about becoming a yoga teacher until she came up with that suggestion.
I think it might have been somewhere in the back of my mind at some point, but I don't know. It was definitely that phone call that brought it to the forefront because at that point I had no thought of doing a yoga teacher training. And it was maybe when she called me that I thought, oh, that could also be a good idea. Like if I ever need to earn $5 or something. I just
Hmm.
had this memory of I had been in Cambodia on vacation a few years earlier. And a friend of mine and I had done a yoga class on a rooftop with a guy who was kind of like traveling through, and he just put up a little sign for rooftop yoga and he charged $5 a person. So I was like, oh, it'd be good to have that skill in my pocket if I ever need to fall back on it. But also I had wanted to do a yoga teacher training for a few years just to deepen my own knowledge
Hmm.
without the thought of becoming a yoga teacher because I thought that I probably wouldn't be capable of being a yoga teacher because I'm actually not a person who's good with spoken words. I'm just very clumsy with them and I always trip over words and like we'll say knee instead of elbow and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yoga teacher is probably not for me, but I ended up just getting hooked, like totally hooked when I did the first teacher training and then ended up doing three more of them and ended up as a yoga teacher.
Well,
That's how that happened.
in the first part of your journey, you didn't go straight to the place where you were taking the training. You did something first
No.
that I don't think I could ever do, even to save my
Ah!
life.
That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Yes, I ended up doing a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation, and it was difficult. You are sitting in silent meditation for about 10 hours a day. It's broken up, so it's not 10 hours straight, but you wake up at 4:30 a.m. and meditate for 2 hours, and then you have breakfast, and then you meditate for another hour, and then a little break and another hour and a half, and so on throughout the whole day. And it was incredibly challenging, actually, physically, to just sit, not moving. And I didn't realize that it would be so painful, but it really, really was. But I think it was something that I needed. I think it was so difficult that it kind of broke my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm a stubborn, hard-headed person. So I think I needed that.
I just keep
Um,
thinking I would be talking to myself when I was in my room by myself. I would not be able to stay silent for 10 days. There's no way.
But you know what was surprising? Like, I also thought it was going to be really difficult not to talk, but it turns out that that part of it was very relaxing. And I didn't feel like talking. And I don't think we realize how much energy we use talking throughout the day. But
Mhm.
when you are suddenly put into this place where you're not, it's just so, so restful to
I even
just.
talk in my sleep. I mean, I can have entire conversations with people. Growing up, my sister would say that she would come in because I would be talking and she would talk to me. I'd be sound asleep and she would have full conversations with me while I was asleep.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I don't shut up.
I mean, maybe it's not for everyone. For the record, when I first found out about it from another friend of mine, she told me her brother had done it. I was like, what? A similar reaction to you. I was like, that's insane. Like, first of all, why would anyone do that? And second of all, no, never. And then somehow my mindset just changed. And I was like, I think I need that.
Now, whenever you don't have these signs that are telling you this is your path, how do you deal with self-doubt? Because you seem like you're very positive and you're very sure of where you're going. Does self-doubt ever pop up for you?
Oh, yes, on a very regular basis. Yeah, I do have a lot of self-doubt. Although I guess it comes in waves. Like sometimes there'll be phases where it's not there. And then I guess it usually pops up like when you're about to try something new,
Hmm.
or I should say when I'm about to try something new that I've never done before. Or also I know like if I'll start just drinking a little too much and too often and stuff and not getting enough sleep, I can get off balance and kind of out of alignment. And then I'll just doubt myself in general. But in those moments where I'm not sure of where I'm going, I have a lot of different techniques. Meditation is a huge one for me, just like sitting down and getting silent and waiting for the answer to kind of rise to the surface. But I love to pull oracle cards. I like to just ask a question and pull an oracle card. And then sometimes, very rarely, like when I really, really want an important answer, I might grab a book and just open a book to a random page.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. I like that.
yeah, that's mentioned in the book later. There was a very, very magical occasion where I did that and got the perfect answer.
What are the oracle cards?
Mm,
Because these are
these
different than
are,
tarot cards.
yeah, whereas tarot cards, you have to have like a special training to know how to interpret the cards. Oracle cards, no training required. They just have typically like a very beautiful message written on them. And usually the way they work, there'll be a deck of cards and you can spread them out. Some people recommend like shuffling them 3 times and then spreading them out. And then you just pull one. And usually there's like a beautiful image on there, and then it'll say one word, and then you open a little book, and the book will have a page that tells you what the card says. And it's really fascinating because if you ask a question, I would say 99% of the time you usually get a perfect answer.
So, what's one of the answers that has really been a significant turning point for you?
Let's see. There have been so many. Although I don't know if any of them have been a turning point. There is, okay, there's one that's coming up, but I'm trying to think to myself if I talk about this, would it be a spoiler? So there's a point in the journey, which is in the book, where I had been seeing this guy and it had been going pretty well. And then something happened. We just had this conflict and blow up and decided it was over. And it was a long distance thing. He had come to visit. So it was like, we wouldn't have the chance to like see each other again in the next week. This was pretty seeming final. And we had already planned to have this cacao ceremony. Are you familiar with cacao ceremonies?
I have heard of this before, but right now I cannot remember what it is.
It's really just it's pretty simple, but can be really beautiful. It's you just take pure cacao. Usually you'll have it in like a solid chunk. And so
Mhm.
to prepare the cacao, you just like take a knife and you shave it and then you put it on the stove with either some like I'll usually use coconut milk or some kind of milk and you just cook it. So it's kind of like making a hot chocolate and you can put some spices in there, some cinnamon and cardamom, a little bit of sugar is nice. So you just make this kind of similar to a hot chocolate in a little cup, and it's very heart opening. So we're sipping this cacao, and then we each pull an oracle card. And there was a line in there. I'm trying to remember when I first read the card in the book, it sounded really final. And I just started to cry. And I'm like, oh, it's like the final stamp, like the cosmic final stamp of finality on this relationship. And then he had pulled a card too. And so he read it aloud to me. And then I realized that both of our cards had one line in there that was almost the same. And that one line said something like, just because something happened in the past doesn't mean that it needs to repeat again in the future.
Oh, wow.
And it was so interesting that that same line was in both of our cards. And I just thought about it and I was like, wait, I guess there's a different way to interpret this card. Like maybe it doesn't mean that our relationship is over. Maybe it's just some bad patterns, like some negative patterns that were rising up are over. And maybe we don't need to keep repeating those. And maybe we can make a fresh start between us. And that is what ended up happening. So I guess I have thought back to that moment and wondered, like, oh, if we hadn't pulled those cards, would that have been the end right there?
Because that's what you were thinking of whenever you guys were together that night, right? That you were
Yeah, we
saying
thought it was
goodbye.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was flying out later that day and he was just still there because, he was visiting me in a different country. Otherwise, he would have left already. But I guess we could say that was a turning point.
So now you made this huge change in your life. You had been in corporate sales. Now you were learning to be a yoga teacher and getting ready to teach English as a second language. You're making this huge move to another country. What made you decide to write a book about it?
Oh, yeah. So at the very end of everything that happened, towards the end of the book, it becomes very surreal and very movie-like. And so while living this experience, I was pinching myself and like, what? This kind of sounds like a movie. So at the end of everything, I end up moving to another country during COVID. It was kind of miraculous that I even got there because there were a lot of closed borders
Mhm.
at the time. So I'm in this new country and I did move there for a man. And I had, throughout the journey, I had posted photos on Facebook and stuff, but I hadn't posted anything about this guy. So I felt like I kind of needed to explain what I was doing there. So I wrote a little paragraph about it and just posted that paragraph. And I got so many reactions of people saying, "Oh my God, this sounds like a book. Like this needs to be a movie." And I'm a very suggestible person. So you say things to me and like, watch out, I'll just take it literally. So like, yeah, I'm half joking and half serious. So that kind of put the seed in my head, I guess. And I just thought to myself, they don't even know the half, like they don't even know like 1/100th of how crazy this all was. And I thought about it and I realized I really want to share this with people because there was so much beauty.
Mhm.
And then I also felt like this experience was kind of given to me, but I felt like it was given to me to be shared as well. I kind of felt like the story wanted to be told because I think when you know the whole story and how everything happens, I think it can change the way that you look at life. Like it can really remove a lot of pessimism. And I think there's so much pessimism in the world today that doesn't need to be there. And that is really holding people back, causing them to miss out on a lot of happiness. So it also happened that the situation was, I had moved to this country where I didn't have the right to work. It was just before the second lockdown. So I didn't know anyone.
Oh, wow.
And so the guy I had ended up moving there, he was working on a rotation. So he promptly left for 10 weeks. So I'm there like alone, I have nothing to do. And I'm like, okay, I've got plenty of time to write this book. Like, I want to write it. And I've loved to write for years. Like the first thing that I ever wanted to be was an author when I was probably 8 years old or 10 years old or something. And that had gone on to the back burner for many decades.
Mm-hmm.
But I had always written, I wrote a blog, and I would just always feel like I was practicing for something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of all came together.
So when you decided to write this book, what was the hardest part of the process for you?
I guess the hardest part was writing about some of the unpleasant experiences
Mm-hmm.
because it was overall a very beautiful journey, but there were definitely some some messy, unpleasant things that came up. But although this was hard, it also became really beautiful. It became very cathartic. And I now highly recommend writing as a therapy tool for anyone who's gone through kind of a traumatic experience. Although I say this, and then I also say, disclaimer, I am not an expert on trauma, so I don't actually know. Maybe I shouldn't even talk about trauma, but just anything emotional. Like if it's been like it's something that just left you really furious at
Mm-hmm.
someone or just really hurts, even if you don't plan to publish the book, just to write it out as if you're just writing the story, because it caused me to relive it while I was writing it. But then once those emotions had come up and kind of gone onto the paper, when I went back and reread it, the emotion was gone,
Yeah.
and now I can read it over and over again and it doesn't bother me. And it's just gone from, in whatever mysterious ways our cells hold on to emotion. It's just gone. So
I'm
yeah.
a very big believer in journaling because I would
Mm,
never did it before I had all of my brain surgeries. But when I was going through that year and all of those experiences, I started journaling because I couldn't talk to people about how I was really feeling about everything. For one thing, I didn't want to burden people with what I was going through.
mm,
So I would write down my honest feelings in the journals and get that out. And it was
mhm.
so cathartic. And so anytime I have a friend who's going through a bad situation, I either give them a journal or I tell them, to go get a journal and to just try it, just see if it will help them, because I think it's possibly a good outlet for them. And
I agree. I agree with that.
I am so grateful that I did this back then, because now that I am writing my memoir, I have all of those notes of these raw feelings that I was having while I was going through all that I don't
Yes.
remember now.
Yes, 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 yes. Same for me. If I hadn't journaled, and also for me, a lot of it was just either writing emails to friends or leaving voice memos on WhatsApp to friends. If I hadn't
Mhm.
have done that, I couldn't have written this book because, yeah.
You mentioned relationships in here. There are specifically things that you did in the book that you had a few breakups and you talk about how you got through that. Do you have any
Mm,
good tips for people who are dealing with relationship breakups?
I do. And I will just say that even beyond the book, I've just been through a lot of breakups in life. And I had been through a few that were difficult, like lingering, like the ongoing aftermath was just like very painful. And I know a lot of people have that experience as well. And towards the end of the book, I experienced a couple of breakups and I had just a totally different experience. And it wasn't because I didn't have strong feelings for the other person, because I had very, very strong feelings for him. And it was him who ended it. So it was not by my choice. And in both instances, it was a surprise to me. So I didn't see it coming, which I think makes it harder. Well, even if you see it coming, it's always hard. But I managed to not suffer. I mean, I won't say I didn't suffer at all, because I think there's always a little bit of suffering and pain, but
Mm-hmm.
it just ended very quickly because I just focused on what I still had, which was that I still had myself. And I realized, he can take himself away from me, but he can never take me away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most important thing to me. And then I would just ask myself, like, okay, so I loved him, but he's gone. But what else do I love in life, besides me? Well, I love my friends. I still have my friends. I love dancing. So I'm going to keep dancing. And I love dinner parties. I'm like, wait, why have I not been throwing dinner parties? I'm going to throw more dinner parties. So I think those Simple little techniques can be really helpful. But I think it also helps if you're in a place where you are happy with yourself and you do have a genuine self-love. Yeah, because I think when you feel good about yourself, then it just makes everything easier to deal with. And I think that's really the only place that you can ever find a successful, lasting romantic relationship too, is like, because if you're wanting them to fill a hole, it's just not going to work. You have to somehow fill that hole on your own, and then you'll attract the person that you want.
I think that the universe brings things to you when you're ready for them.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I had wanted to find love for my whole adult life and even my probably teenage life. And I had almost given up hope because, I was seeing all my friends one by one, like find someone else. Not all of them. I have a lot of single, awesome friends as well. But I'm like, I just felt like it would probably never happen to me. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to focus on whatever else I love in life. But there was a moment, it's in the book, it's about, I think, halfway through. And in that period of years, it was probably like a year and a half after traveling, where I had this incredibly profound meditation, and I was sitting there and I just felt so surrounded by love and so full of love that I felt like, oh, I don't feel like this fairy tale love that I've wanted. Like, I don't even feel like that's missing. Like, I have so much, I just feel satisfied and complete. And like, if that comes along, okay, but I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And it was after that point that everything started to, like, the love story happened.
Now, this is the point of the show that we like to do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but we refuse to give up.
Okay, I'm going to shoot for making them quick.
So, okay, here we go. Question 1. What is your favorite yoga pose?
Ooh. Oh, you're right. This is going to be tough. How can I have just one? Oh, God, there's so many.
See, I love pigeon. Pigeon is like my absolute favorite.
Okay. I do love pigeon now, and I used to hate pigeon. I hated pigeon for years. Like, I would be in a class and be like, why does this pose even exist? Why do people want to do this? Which, side note, it is said that we hold a lot of childhood anger in our hips, which we do have a lot of peptide receptors around the hip area. So that's it's probably true. So anyway, yeah, that could be that. That's one of my favorites. I also love butterfly pose, which is a yin posture. Do you know this one? Where and when you're seated and you're leaning forward, and you can rest your forehead on a block, or you can rest it on your feet or your hands. That's a really good one.
So yeah, I definitely have to use blocks. There's no other way to do that one.
Thank goodness they invented blocks. They are so useful.
I may have to put pictures of these poses on the webpage so people can see them for those who don't know what the poses are.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So now question 2. What repeating numbers happen most often in your life?
Ooh, I tend to see a lot of them, but probably 111 and 1111 show up a lot. But then I see a lot of 555s and 444 and 333 and 222. And you know what? It's cool because I know you live in Germany, so you'll relate to this. So I was living in Europe for a while as well. And because there the time is military time. So then you get like a bigger selection. So I'll see like 1616 and 1816.
Question 3. Since you live such a healthy life, do you have any bad habits that you're still trying to break free from?
Absolutely. So I do try to be healthy, but I'm a person who loves to have fun, and I also hate to be boring. Like, I never want to be boring. And I feel like it's a little boring to just be super healthy, like all the time.
Yeah.
So I think we have to have some vices, but I really love sugar. So that would be a vice, like chocolate. I try to keep it in moderation and balance, but it can tend to get a little out of whack. I'm okay with having a little sugar in my life. Like, I think sugar is there. It sweetens life. I mean, I like my life to have some sweetness in it. So
yeah. Okay, question 4. What is the first thing that you do when a negative thought pops into your head?
Well, I can tell you what is the first thing I should do when a
Mhm.
negative pops into my head. I should think the opposite. But yeah, in actual real life, I mean, sometimes that thought can just be followed by others of a similar vein and just
Mhm.
take up residency. And then eventually I get to a point where I realize, okay, well, that's just that those are just thoughts and they're in my head and they're in many other people's heads as well. So let's just focus on what I want.
And that's one of those things that I've tried stressing with people too who have like a lot of anxiety because I have a lot of anxiety. I'm like a ball of anxiety every day.
Mhm.
And
I'm hearing this a lot recently from people.
yeah, some of the people that I've been interviewing lately, we've talked about this like off the show, that with the
Mhm.
way that the world has gone since COVID, some people have so much stress, they have so much
Mhm.
anxiety, and people are trying to find ways to deal with it. So that's one of the things I've been asking people. It's like, okay, what's the first thing you do when that thought pops into your head? Because it's so hard to shut it down because
Mhm.
negative things and negative thoughts are easier to believe than positive, encouraging ones.
Yes. Yeah.
Because negative, you can just accept it. You don't have to do anything. You're right. It's not going to work. I'm not even going to try. With positive, you have to think, okay, this is going to work. I have all of the stuff that I need to do to make it work. So there's action involved in positive. Negative, you can just sit there and accept it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. It's interesting to me that just recently I've been hearing from so many people that they have anxiety, even from the most positive, happiest people I know.
Mhm.
And I have my own share of anxiety as well. I have a nervous temperament like since birth, but I would say that it's much more relaxed now because I do have this bigger picture of trust, but then that anxiety can still pop up.
And a lot of people really do internalize so much and then it explodes.
Yes, definitely. There needs to be an outlet. For me, it was always running or kickboxing.
Ooh, kickboxing. I didn't do kickboxing, but I actually learned how to box.
That would work. That would be good too, I think.
And man, I was really surprised what a good full body workout that is. That is amazing.
Yes. Yeah,
So, question
absolutely.
5. What is your favorite comfort food?
I love comfort food. Again, it's going to be hard to pick just one.
Mhm.
Pizza, like
Yeah,
wine and pizza, so satisfying. Such a good combination together. Sweet potato fries with like
nice.
a good dipping sauce. In Belgium, they'll combine like mayonnaise and ketchup.
Yeah.
That works well. Also, Indian food. Indian food is so comforting
Hmm.
with all those spices and just like the creaminess of
Yeah.
it and like a cup of steaming masala chai. Yeah, there's so many.
Now that's got me planning a new menu for this weekend.
Ah.
My husband and I both love like authentic Indian food. Well, now let's refresh everybody's memory. Tell them who you are, the name of your book, and where they can find you.
Okay, so I'm Sonya Moore. The name of my book is Some Kind of Magic, a true story of love, life, and wanderlust. And if you want to find out more about me, you can find everything on my website, which is sonyamore.com. Sonya is spelled with a Y. And on Instagram at Sonya Moore underscore here, HERE. Oh,
And
and I do have a YouTube channel. I guess I should mention that as well. It's yoga. It's Breathe, Move, Bliss
oh,
on
nice. I'll have to
YouTube.
check that out. I need some new yoga shows to do.
There's a bunch of different styles on there. So if you're looking for something like relaxing after work, or if you want something like a strong, invigorating vinyasa or a yin, a little bit of everything.
Sounds interesting. I will definitely be checking that out.
And it has become really fun because, I love to travel and I love beauty. I love the beauty of the world. And it happened that as we were traveling, I would find like this place that would make an amazing spot to film. And I'd be like, oh my God, let's film here. So for me, it just turned into this way to share both the beauty of the planet and yoga at the same time.
And that's the one thing that because we don't use video for our podcast. It's just an audio podcast. That's why I created the Book Banter magazine, was because I wanted to be able to get some images and let people connect with the authors, seeing them and seeing their book covers. And I am looking forward to putting you in the magazine for February, because I want to add in some of those photos that you shared of you in yoga poses with this incredible landscape behind you. I mean, these places are just gorgeous.
Yay. Well, I'm excited to be in that magazine. And yes, there are, oh my God, this planet we live on is so spectacular. And there's just always more to discover.
I will have all of her social media links in the description of the podcast, so you can go and find her and her book easily. And don't forget to check out Book Banter magazine for the February-March issue, because there will be a photo spread in there as well. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. I was looking forward to this from the minute I saw the book. I knew I had to have you part of our love fest for February-March. This is just absolutely amazing.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
So there you have it, folks. My incredible interview with the amazing Sonya Moore. Do go check out her book. It is so well written. It is just phenomenal. The things that she did to change her life, to get the life that really fills her soul and makes her happy. It's amazing. So many people get locked into a good career and they don't want to give it up, no matter how miserable it actually makes them. And to see somebody who went after their dreams is just inspiring. And it's inspiring me to keep working even harder on everything that I am doing with Burkhart Books, Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, the Book Talk podcast, and our companion, Book Banter magazine. Don't forget, you can go to our magazine right now, because the current issue has the information on Sonya and her book, and you can see the incredible photos that we were talking about. She really has gone to some amazing places, and her life is just incredible. Now, don't forget, I am working very hard on my next book, Free Bad Haircut with Each Craniotomy. We are looking at publishing in October of 2024 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of my last brain surgery. Be sure to keep watching our social media and burkhartbooks.com for more information as it becomes available about this book. We're hoping sometime in the next month or so to have a sneak peek and, of course, our cover reveal. So keep coming back for more episodes with great authors. We've got more coming. Next Wednesday, we've got Eve Black with her Savage Raiders Motorcycle Club Spicy Romance series. Then the following Wednesday, we have J.R. Byers and her Blackwood Romance series. That's a sweeter, more historical fiction type of romance with a little bit of paranormal thrown in. And then you actually get a bonus author starting the first week of April. She was originally scheduled to be in our Love Fest as part of our season opener for season 3, but because of situations beyond her control, we had to reschedule her interview. But you will still get to hear from Kushi Saha and her Unraveled Duet series. All of these great authors are coming up in the next few weeks, so please keep coming back for more. And now you know what time it is, folks. It's time for you all to go forth and be really happy that we're bringing you so much love.